To really understand how big data can be useful, we can look at 4 different aspects that are usually referred to as the 4 V's of big data. So these are volume, so how much data there is; variety, how much or how little variety actually exists; velocity, which is how fast data is being produced and or received; and veracity, how accurate is that data. There's also a 5th V, typically referred to as value, but we won't actually include that in this particular lecture. But if you are looking at big data information online, you might see that 5th V out there called value. But let's take a deeper dive into each one of these. So volume of data, as I mentioned, deals with the scale of information. So how much is there? And so it was mentioned, this graphic here is from a few years ago, but they mentioned that by 2020, there will be 40 zettabytes of data, or 43 trillion gigabytes. And that's an increase of over 300 times more from 2005. Also, 6 billion people have cell phones, which is an insane amount of cellular devices. And if you think about how many of those are smartphones, which are generating a significant amount of information, right? It's just amazing the amount of information that we are generating nowadays, especially with so many internet connected devices, things like smartwatches, smart cars, even semi-smart cars that aren't truly self-driving but have electronics in them that generate information. Things like businesses, though, have increased the sheer amount of data that they're dealing with now as well, because 20, 30 years ago, there really wasn't the means to actually, for one, generate this kind of level of data, as well as store that type of information as well. So now we just basically store everything. Overall, storage has become significantly cheaper than it has been in the past, and we can technology has gotten a lot better, and we can store a lot more information in a much smaller amount of space. Variety of data is really important as well. So what kind of information are we actually generating? Oh, and we already saw what happened in an internet minute earlier in a previous video. So what does that really equate to, right? Well, things like smart devices, internet connected devices. So smartwatches, smartphones, things like your IoT devices inside of your house, internet connected lights. Social media is a huge one. Everyone is using some form of social media, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, streaming services, YouTube, Twitch, Netflix, Hulu, all of those sorts of streaming services. And then we even also have healthcare, right? So 20, 30 years ago, healthcare was still all pure pencil or pen and paper, right? When you went to the doctor's office, they came in with your file on a clipboard and filled out all of your information. Now, if you go to the doctor's office, majority of the time, they're going to come in with a laptop instead of a clipboard. And so all of your information is now digitized. Your chart, all of your health information is online, or at least digitized instead of being on physical paper. That's 150 exabytes, and that was in 2011. Due to our reliance of technology and the fact that pretty much everyone is online almost all the time during the day, we're generating a sheer amount of information in a variety of different contexts. And so that provides a lot more interesting use cases of the information that we're generating online in our daily routine. The 3rd V of big data that we talked about is velocity. So velocity deals with essentially the speed, right, of how we're actually retrieving that information. So, for example, the New York Stock Exchange deals with 1 terabyte of trade information during each trading session. By 2016, there was an estimated amount of almost 19 billion network connections. So that's almost 2.5 connections per person on Earth. So if we stop to think about how many devices that you currently have or currently own, that are connected to the internet at any given point in time. It's a lot, right? When I was a kid, we might have had one computer that was connected intermittently to the internet through a dial-up connection. But now I have a smartphone, a smartwatch, Alexa devices that are in my house that are always connected online. My TV has a wireless internet connection. Your gaming devices have an internet connection. So the number of things that are connected anymore, the number of connections that you have to the outside world, have increased drastically. And so has the speed of which you have, the speed of your internet connection. As before, right, with a dial-up internet connection, there's only so much information that can be exchanged on the internet every second. But now with high-speed internet access, many more people are able to generate and consume significant amount of more information than we ever have been able to before. And that's not just typical devices that we experience. We even have things like cars, right? Cars are generating a sheer more amount of information than they ever have as well. Even if you don't own a smart car, most modern cars come equipped with far more sensors that are actually can actually transmit back to even the manufacturer to tell them information about your vehicle, or even just tell you more about your vehicle than what information that you would have had before. The last V in the last V that we'll be talking about today is veracity, which deals with the uncertainty of information. And this is a really important one because we have a significant amount of information, and a lot of business revolves around that information as well. So recommender systems online on Amazon, Google searches, your digital footprint that you leave online, all of that information is consumed in some way, shape, or form, whether or not be from the company that you actually used a service for and generated that information, or you personally as a user for things like your health, so smartwatches, Fitbit trackers, that sort of thing. Is that data accurate? Is that data valid? And that's where we're dealing with the veracity or uncertainty of that information. And so this is a really interesting aspect here. 1 in 3 business leaders don't actually trust the information that they use to make valid decisions. A little over a quarter of people done in the survey were unsure about how accurate their data actually was. And this costs a significant amount of money, as estimated that poor data costs the U.S. about $3.1 trillion a year. So if you think about the number of business decisions that are actually made using this data, or the number of services that you use that rely on big data techniques or data that is being generated, it's a lot, right? A lot of business revolves around that. And if that data is incorrect or invalid, that's money loss. And it can cause a lot of different controversies. And in some cases, in terms of things like healthcare, cars, and various other things, it can actually cost lives as well. So the veracity or certainty of data is an extremely important aspect of how we actually work with big data, how we store it, how we retrieve it, and how we actually analyze.